Imagine a command from God so personal, so shocking, it would tear your world apart. You are a man of faith living a quiet life when a divine whisper upends everything. It is a command that goes against every moral instinct, every social norm, every beat of your own heart. Go, the voice says, take yourself a wife of whoredom and have children of whoredom. This is not the beginning of a scandalous fable, my friends. This is the opening chapter of one of the most profound and heartbreaking stories ever recorded. The story of the prophet Hosea. It is a story that transcends its ancient context, reaching across the centuries to speak directly into the chaos of our own lives, a story of catastrophic betrayal and a love so stubborn, so relentless, so divine, it simply will not let go. We are about to embark on a journey into the soul of a man, and in doing so, we will peer into the very heart of God. We will walk the dusty streets of a kingdom teetering on the brink of collapse, a nation drunk on its own success and blind to its own decay. This is not just a tale from a dusty old book. This is a cosmic drama played out on a human stage, a mirror held up to our own infidelities and the unbreakable faith that pursues us in spite of ourselves. So, lean in and listen closely. For the story of Hosea is, in a very real way, your story and mine. Our story begins in the 8th century before Christ, in the tumultuous and divided kingdoms of ancient Israel. The grand united kingdom of David and Solomon is a fading memory, a ghost of a golden age long since past. The land is now split in two, a northern kingdom that retains the name Israel, with its capital in Samaria, and a southern kingdom of Judah, centered on Jerusalem. Our focus is on the north, on Israel, a nation rich in agriculture and trade, a nation that, on the surface, seemed to be thriving. The long reign of King Jeroboam II had brought a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity. The borders were secure, the merchants were wealthy, and the storehouses were full. But this prosperity came at a terrible cost. A cost that was hidden just beneath the thin veneer of civility and success. It was a society rotting from the inside out, a culture where the gap between the rich and the poor had become a chasm, where justice was a commodity to be bought and sold, where the priests had become performers and the people had forgotten the God who had brought them out of Egypt. Into this simmering cauldron of spiritual and social decay, a young man named Hosea heard a call that would define his entire life. The command was unequivocal, it was specific, and it was devastating. Go, take unto thee Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim. We know nothing of Hosea's reaction in that moment. The scripture is silent on the turmoil that must have raged within his soul. Was there anger? Was there confusion? Was there a desperate attempt to bargain with the Almighty? We can only imagine the weight of those words. To marry a woman known to be, or destined to be, promiscuous was social suicide in the ancient Near East. It meant shame, it meant ridicule, it meant a life lived under the constant whispering judgment of his community. His name would be a punchline, his children objects of scorn. This was not a metaphorical assignment. This was a real flesh and blood command that would involve real flesh and blood pain. Yet Hosea obeyed. He went to Gomer. He paid the bride price. He entered into a covenant with her. In this very act we see the first flicker of the covenant of grace, a love that initiates, a love that chooses not because of purity, but in full knowledge of the impurity, a love that enters into the mess. The early days of their marriage, we can presume, held some semblance of happiness. 3 children were born, and to each God gave a name that was not a blessing but a prophecy, a heavy word of judgment upon the nation. The first was a son, Jezreel, named not for the beauty of the valley, but for the blood that had been spilled there, a name that echoed the sins of King Jehu's violent coup decades earlier, a name declaring that the dynasty of Jehu was finished. Then came a daughter, Lo-ruhamah, A name that means not loved or no mercy, a gut-wrenching declaration that God would no longer have mercy on the house of Israel, that he would utterly forgive them no more. Finally, a second son, Lo-Ami. Not my people, the most devastating word of all, for you are not my people, and I will not be your God. Can you imagine the scene? Hosea looking down at his newborn son, his heart surely full of a father's natural love, yet having to speak this terrible sentence over him every time he called his name? His very household had become a living, breathing sermon, a walking, talking object lesson of a broken covenant. But the personal tragedy was only just beginning. The prophecy embodied in Gomer's nature began to unfold. The scripture tells us she wearied of Hosea, she grew restless, she forgot that it was he who had given her grain and new wine and oil. She pursued her lovers. She said, I will go after them that give me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, mine oil and my drink. She returned to the life she had known, or perhaps had never truly left. We don't know the precise details. Was she a temple prostitute in the pagan Canaanite fertility cults? Was she a common adulteress, seeking excitement and gifts from other men? The text suggests both, painting a picture of a woman who saw relationships as transactional, who believed her sustenance came from her lovers, not from her faithful husband. The pain in Hosea's heart must have been a physical ache, a constant, gnawing torment. Every glance from a neighbor, every whispered conversation that stopped when he walked by, every empty space in his bed at night was a fresh reminder of his public shame and his private agony. Now, let's pull the camera back from this domestic heartbreak and see the bigger picture. Because Hosea's broken home was a precise, divinely orchestrated mirror of Israel's broken covenant with Yahweh. Just as Gomer was unfaithful to Hosea, Israel was being unfaithful to God. The prosperity of Jeroboam II's reign had led to a spiritual amnesia. The people credited the Canaanite god Baal for the rains and the fertile crops. They engaged in syncretistic worship, blending the worship of Yahweh with the sensual, fertility-based rituals of the surrounding nations. They would offer a sacrifice to Yahweh in the morning, and in the evening they would be at the high places, engaging in sacred prostitution, believing that such acts would persuade Baal to make their fields and their flocks fertile. It was a theological betrayal of the highest order. They had forgotten the first and greatest commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. They had forgotten the covenant made at Sinai, the vows they had sworn to be God's treasured possession, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Hosea's prophecy, therefore, becomes a blistering indictment of this national adultery. He uses the most vivid, the most brutal language to describe their sin. He says they have played the harlot and have gone a-whoring from their God. He compares them to a stubborn heifer, to a cake not turned, burnt on one side and raw on the other, utterly useless. He describes their political alliances with Egypt and Assyria as an act of prostitution, seeking protection and favor from foreign powers instead of relying on the Lord. He lays bare the moral decay that underpinned their economic success. He cries out against the merchants who use dishonest scales, the nobles who are sick with the iniquity of Ephraim, the priests who feed on the sin of the people. There was no truth, no covenant loyalty, no knowledge of God in the land, only swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery. They break all bounds, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. The depth of the betrayal is matched only by the depth of the coming judgment. Hosea, speaking for God, becomes a prophet of doom. He sees the storm clouds gathering on the horizon, and he names them Assyria. This rising superpower to the east, with its brutal, efficient military machine, would be the instrument of God's wrath. The prosperity they enjoyed would be stripped away. The vineyards and fig trees would become barren, the festivals would cease, and the people would be cast out of the land God had given them. They shall not dwell in the Lord's land, Hosea proclaims. Ephraim shall return to Egypt, and they shall eat unclean things in Assyria. This was the ultimate curse, a reversal of the Exodus, a return to a state of slavery and defilement. The names of Hosea's children were being fulfilled before their very eyes. Lo Ruhamah, no mercy. Lo Ami, not my people. The covenant was broken, and the consequences were inevitable. But here is where the story twists, where it moves from a simple tragedy of betrayal and punishment into something far more profound, far more mysterious. Just when you think the story has reached its logical, despairing conclusion, the voice of God shifts. It is a shift that defies all human logic, a shift that can only be explained by the nature of divine love. After chapters of scathing indictment and promised destruction, we hear a different tone, a tone of aching parental love. How can I give you up, O Ephraim? How can I hand you over, O Israel? My heart recoils within me, my compassion grows warm and tender. Can you hear the conflict in the divine heart? This is not the cold, detached sentence of a judge. This is the anguished cry of a betrayed lover, a wounded parent. The judgment is real, the consequences are coming, but they are not God's final word. His final word is love. This brings us back to Gomer. For Hosea, the prophecy was not over. His wife had left him, she had descended to the lowest point possible. The text suggests she had become the property of another man. Perhaps she had sold herself into slavery to pay her debts, or she had been abandoned by her lovers and had no other means of survival. She was at the rock bottom of degradation and shame. And then God speaks to Hosea again. Go again, he says, love a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the children of Israel, though they turn to other gods. The command is even more specific now. It is not just to take her back, but to love her, to actively pursue her, to go and find her in her filth and her despair, and to bring her home. So Hosea goes. He has to buy her back. The price is steep, 15 shekels of silver and a homer and a half of barley, the total value of a common slave. He goes to the public square, or perhaps to the temple precincts where such transactions took place, and he finds the woman who had broken his heart, who had humiliated him, who had abandoned his love and his provision. She is not the beautiful young bride he once knew. She is used, she is broken, she is owned. And he pays the price. He says to her, you must dwell as mine for many days. You shall not play the harlot or belong to another man. So will I also be to you. This is the moment of ultimate grace. This is the covenant of grace in flesh and blood action. He doesn't buy her back to make her his slave. He buys her back to restore her as his wife. He imposes a period of purification, a time of separation from the old life, after which he will recommit himself to her fully. It is a picture of restoration, of redemption, of a love that pays the price to reclaim what was lost. This act of Hosea is a powerful foreshadowing, a living prophecy of what God would do for all of humanity through Jesus Christ. Just as Gomer was enslaved by her own choices, trapped in a situation she could not escape, so we are enslaved by sin, by our own spiritual adultery. We chase after other lovers, power, money, pleasure, approval, believing they will give us life, only to find ourselves in a deeper bondage. And into our slavery, God comes in the person of Jesus. He pays the price to redeem us, not with silver or gold, but with his own precious blood. The cross is the ultimate marketplace where the divine lover buys back his faithless bride. It is the ultimate expression of the covenant of grace, a covenant not based on our fidelity but on his. It is a covenant sealed, not by our promises, but by his blood. The story of Hosea and Gomer does not end with a fairy tale happily ever after, at least not in the way we might expect. The book of Hosea ends with a call to return, a promise of healing, and a vision of a future restoration. I will heal their apostasy. God says. I will love them freely, for my anger has turned from them. I will be like the dew to Israel. He shall blossom like the lily. The names of the children are reversed, and I will say to not my people, you are my people, and he shall say, you are my God. The covenant is renewed, not because Israel finally got its act together, but because God's love is fundamentally unbreakable. The judgment had to happen. The exile to Assyria came just as Hosea prophesied. The northern kingdom was wiped off the map. But that was not the end of the story. The love of God was waiting on the other side of judgment, a love that would ultimately fulfill this promise in a new covenant, a covenant written on the heart. So what does this ancient story, this strange and painful drama, have to say to us today in our modern world of instant gratification and complex relationships? Everything. The story of Hosea is our story. We are Gomer. We are the faithless ones, the ones who easily forget the source of our blessings, the ones who chase after other gods, who believe the lies that something else, anything else, can satisfy the deep longing of our souls. We seek our identity in our careers, our security in our bank accounts, our fulfillment in our relationships, our salvation in our politics. We are spiritual adulterers, every one of us. And yet, the message of Hosea is that we are pursued. In the midst of our mess, in the depth of our own making, God comes. He does not wait for us to clean ourselves up. He does not wait for us to muster up enough remorse. He comes to us in our brokenness, and he pays the price to bring us home. His love is not a response to our worthiness, it is the cause of it. His grace is not conditioned on our fidelity, it is the foundation for it. The covenant of grace means that your story does not have to end in the shame of the marketplace. It can end in the embrace of a love that will not let you go, a love that is stronger than your sin, deeper than your shame, and more permanent than your failures. The question the story leaves us with is not, can you be faithful, but will you allow yourself to be loved by a God who is?